Salam alaikum. Thank you for the invitation, for sharing with all of you in this important Congress of Iman Reza. The topic of this Congress, I think, is more relevant than ever. Justice for all, injustice for nobody. This concept inspired from the thought of Iman Reza is a concept that has a historical relevance for the each historical period, but specifically today, because today we're living a moment of decadence of the Western imperialism and the civilization they put forward at a world scale, known as modernity. We can call it capitalist modernity or the modern capitalist Western world. There are many ways of naming it, but we're not dealing with just an economic system of domination exploitation such as capitalism. We're dealing with a civilization. And to talk about justice today, inspiring Iman Reza and this concept of justice for all and injustice for anybody, okay? I think we need to historicize a little the context of the world we're living. We're living in a civilization with an economic system. When I say that, it's a response to the westernized left, the Eurocentric left, who talks about an economic system as the main problem of the world today. And in a decolonial perspective, we're talking about a civilization that is composed of multiple hierarchies of domination at a world scale. The European colonial expansion that began before the 15th century and continue, its expansion, especially after 1492. This European colonial expansion was a civilizational expansion, was not just an economic expansion. Wherever they went, they destroyed the civilizations they encountered and imposed their own civilization. The European colonial expansion, we can say the modern European colonial expansion began with the conquest of Al-Andalus in the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula. And the importance of the conquest of Al-Andalus is that the methods of conquest they use during the conquest of Al-Andalus are the same methods of conquest that they're going to be using and rehearsing everywhere else. So the conquest of Al-Andalus was like the laboratory of the methods of conquest that they use at a world scale. The European colonial expansion began with the Castilian Christian crown that expanded to the south of the Iberian Peninsula and destroyed that marvelous civilization that belonged to Islamic civilization known as Al-Andalus. And in Al-Andalus, you have the conviviality, the experience of conviviality between different faiths, the Jews, the Christians, and Muslims under Muslim rule, under a Muslim political authority. And the example of Al-Andalus carries on into our day. Now, one of the methods of conquest they used there was the ethnic cleansing of the population. They were the slogan was Christianize or I kill you. They were forcing people to convert to Christianity, and whoever resists will be tortured and killed. And they practice ethnic cleansing of the territory. Those who resisted conversion were killed or have to escape across the Mediterranean to Muslim lands in the north part of Africa. Those who stayed were forced to conversion. They couldn't do otherwise. They have to stay there. And in order to stay alive, they were forced to convert and to Christendom. So one of the methods they used was ethnic cleansing. They will wipe out the people from the territory, both Jews and Muslims. They will be wiped out from the territory, and the territory, the land, will be occupied by Christian settlers coming from the north of the Iberian Peninsula. So those who survived the conquest of Al-Andalus were forced to work a number of hours a day in a form of coerced labor known as the encomienda. And they have to work for nothing, for free, to the owner of the land, these Christian families coming from the north, taking over the land. And they have to work a certain number of hours a day for nothing. And it was a form of coerced labor, because they were forced to work a number of hours a day free to the owner of the land. And so this form of colonization that today we call settler colonialism is highly correlated with genocide, because in order to take over the land from the native and the people who are the original settlers of the land, the people, the original population who was there before, they have to use violence. And different from exploitation colonialism, where the colonizer is interested in the exploitation of only in the exploitation of labor, in settler colonialism, the interest of the colonizer is to take over the land, the territory, the resources of the indigenous population and kick them out of the land. So there is a high correlation between settler colonialism and genocide, okay? And I'm talking about this system, because this system was created in the conquest of Al-Andalus. That is, this settler colonial method of conquest and the ethnic cleansing of the territory that accompanies settler colonialism, and the wiping out of the indigenous people from the land by force, the mass killing of the people who live in the land in order for the colonizers, in this case, Christian families coming from the north, to take over the land. This method of conquest was rehearsed as a laboratory. The first moment of the modern settler colonialism was in the conquest of Al-Andalus. This method of conquest, they took it to, when they expand to the Americas, when they expand to Africa, Asia, other parts of the world, this is a method of conquest they'll be using in different regions of the world. And sometimes it will be a combination of settler colonialism with exploitation colonialism. Sometimes there are experiences where it's only exploitation colonialism, and there are other instances where you have experiences of colonialism that is only settler colonialism. So you have all these varieties of experience in different regions of the world, where they will either combine both together in one space, exploitation colonialism with settler colonialism, and they will be practicing ethnic cleansing in one part of the territory, while then taking native people, enslaving them to work for nothing in their enterprises in the land. Or they will just go to places and do only exploitation colonialism, or they will go to places that do only settler colonialism. Wherever you have fundamentalist settler colonialism, the indigenous population was radically diminished, that is reduced by the extermination policies of the process of settler colonialism. So today we're looking at the world and we see still the continuation of these processes of colonialism with new means, with new technologies, with new forms. Okay, and this is where in most of the world today, we went from colonialism to neo-colonialism, new forms of colonialism. So we're living in an unjust system from the moment we are born, because this civilization expanded all over the world, destroyed all the civilization they encountered, and imposed their own civilization of domination, exploitation. And this civilization have different hierarchies of domination that are not just economic. There's also racism, the dehumanization, systematic dehumanization of the majority of population in the world, and the systematic hyperhumanization of a minority of population in the world. This is the West and the rest. Westernized populations become the superior races, while non-Western people become the inferior races. And we see this reproduced in around as a global hierarchy of domination at a world scale. Okay. Then in the transition from colonialism to neo-colonialism, a lot of the structures of domination continue into the present day. For example, not only racism, but also Eurocentrism. That is the Eurocentric paradigm becoming the superior knowledge, while the rest of humanity and the rest of knowledge produced in the rest of humanity is considered inferior knowledge. So there is something called epistemic racism. And then we have also the domination over women, Christendom patriarchy becoming the way that was imposed around the world with the European colonial expansion, establishing a hierarchy of domination of males over women. And this domination was carried on to everywhere around the world. Before the European colonial expansion, and I have no time to discuss this here, but in many parts of the world, there was different relationship between men and women. It was more a relationship of equality or a complementary relationship. And you could see that in many parts of the world. I don't have time to develop this point here, but there's enough literature there documenting how this patriarchal system that today we have in modernity was not something that came from the past, was something imposed by European colonization in many parts of the world, in places where the previous civilization they destroyed did not have these structures of domination of men or men over women. You know, so we have to say this because today the West have distorted history and have claimed that except the West, everybody's patriarchal. And it's really the opposite. It's because of Western European colonial expansion that they destroyed all the previous civilization. They came with a form of patriarchy that is coming from Christendom, and they imposed it everywhere they colonized. And now it's everywhere, you know, and now we have to deal with this structure of domination that did not exist before in most of the world, okay? Most of the world, they colonized or they came to destroy their civilization, the previous civilization did not have this kind of structures. The same with racism. Racism is a modern phenomenon. It didn't exist before. This dehumanization, hyperhumanization along the line of the human, where the superior beings are considered the human, inferior beings are considered non-human or subhumans, is a modern phenomenon. I don't have the time to argue this. I know this, I'm saying controversial things here, but I have enough videos out there in online that some of you who would like to know more about this can consult it. I have also published books on these things. So you are all invited to search more about this thesis I'm simplifying here for reasons of time. And so the modern European colonial expansion also carry on another structure that is also problematic, which is the Cartesian dualism. You know, Descartes, the philosopher, the European philosopher considered the founder of modern philosophy. Descartes had this dualism that was a secularization of Christendom between nature and humans. Okay, he would say males because he won't include women as part of the human. You know, at that time he would consider a woman to be part of nature. And the thing is that in Christendom cosmology, nature was part of evil, of Satan, you know, of they demonize nature and the forms of beings and living beings of nature as part of the realm of Satan. And then the dominant, the pharaohs, the monarchs, and, you know, the emperors will be part of divine being, will be representative of divine being on earth, and all their followers will be part of the divine. Anybody who will be critical of those structures of power, domination, injustices will be classified together with nature as evil, okay? So this dualism is an ontological dualism that established two beings that were separate one from the other. The divine beings were the representative of God on earth. In this case, the power structures, the power elites, together with their followers, and then nature that belongs to the realm of evil of Satan. This dualism in Christendom pushed European Christendom world to a form of obscurantism over more than 1,000 years, because any scientist who tried to work with the forces of nature was immediately accused of playing with evil forces and will be burned alive. Okay, so this contradiction between spirituality and science was a problem of local European history. That was not a problem in the rest of humanity, where science and spirituality have no contradiction. They work together. Why? Because in the rest of humanity, there was no dualism. It was a holistic vision. Despite the discrepancies, differences between different cosmologies in the world, they were all holistic in the sense that they all saw the relationship between non-human forms of life with human life as part of one single structure, one single cosmos, one single universal structure. And the life will be the result of an equilibrium and coexistence between different forms of life in a single cosmos. Okay, so you have the concept of Tawhid everywhere. This concept of difference within unity. Okay, difference within unity. And while the dualistic concept is different without unity, it's a separation, ontological separation between the human and the non-human. And those who were critical of the emperors or of the pharaohs or of the monarchs, they were pushed to the side of evil. And women were always suspicious in the Christendom patriarchy of being more to the side of nature that is evil than to the side of the divine. So they were always suspicious in Christendom patriarchy. They would see women as suspicious of evil forces. And that's why you have the burning of women. Millions of women buried alive accused of being witches. Okay, this obscurantism, Europe went through more than 1,000 years, close to 1,400 years of obscurantism with this cosmology of Christendom. Christendom is a theology of domination. Look, I'm not saying Christianity. I'm saying Christendom. Christendom is a theology of domination. It's a distortion of Christianity. Christianity also had there the concept of unity, difference within unity. It was a holistic concept, but it was destroyed by Christendom in the transition from Unitarian Christianity to Trinitarian Christianity. It was the Trinitarian concept that destroyed the holism of Christianity and imposed a form of theology of domination that was produced precisely to consent from the people below into the power structures and the powerful people, so who benefited from this theology of domination. The theology of liberation that was Unitarian Christianity was basically destroyed. It was destroyed not only theologically, but also by force. The Roman Empire, if you remember, that invented in the 4th century this idea of Trinitarian Christianity, basically massacred the Unitarian Christians all over. And then this transition is important to understand it in order to understand the modern world, because the modern world is a secularization of Christendom narratives. Okay? And again, I don't have the time to develop this, but just give you one example. This dualism of Christendom between the divine human beings and the evil forces, okay? Other living beings that were classified as part of evil, as part of Satan, okay? This dualism is going to be secularized in the 17th century by René Descartes into the Cartesian dualism between man and nature, okay? He will take away the theological language of this dualism coming from Christendom, but we'll continue talking about nature as something that is destructive, that is an enemy of humans, that is savage, that is barbarian, that is, so all this description of looking at nature as an enemy, okay, looking at other living beings as enemies in the same way Christendom look at nature as enemy, as evil enemy. And they did the same thing. This dualism that seems to be innocent is not, because a lot of the technology, all technology has cosmology. There's no technology without cosmology. So a lot of the technology that have been used in the world of capitalism for the past 450 years is founded on Cartesian dualism, on this Christendom dualism that is secularized under Christendom, and is secularized in the modern world from Christendom to modernity. And René Descartes is a central figure here. What are the consequences of this? It has big consequences, because if every technology has cosmology, and now we are producing technology under global capitalism from the 17th century until today, with Cartesian dualism as the cosmology of capitalism, then we're going to be producing technology that considers the idea that human life is ontologically a different being that produces and reproduces itself, insulated, isolated from the other living beings because of this dualism. This stupid idea became the idea under which we're building technology. What I mean by this is that now, every time we build technology, because we think that human life is ontologically separated from other forms of life, from nature, then we don't have the concern or the rationality of being careful not to destroy life around us. That is, build a technology that do not take into consideration if you're destroying the life around you or not, because you have conceived that human life will continue because has been thought as ontologically separated, dualistically separated from other forms of life. So the problem with this is that from then on, we have produced technology destructive of life because it doesn't have the rationality of reproduction of life. It had a rationality of destruction of life because it doesn't care, because you have conceived human life as separate, insulated, dualistically, ontologically, dualistically separated. Then the other forms of life are conceived as disposable. You can destroy them and human life will continue. This is the common sense. And in fact, we're seeing the consequences of that at a planetary level today. We've been over several centuries of producing technology under Cartesian dualism as a cosmology that is destructive of life. In the previous civilization, before modernity, before the European colonial expansion that destroyed all the previous civilizations, we had cosmologies that were holistic. So every time people produce technology, they have the care of, paying attention to not destroy the living beings and the life around you, because it was a common sense in a holistic concept, in a non-dualistic concept, that human life can only reproduce itself in a balance with other forms of life, because we are part of this balance between human life and non-human life is central to the reproduction of life. Human life is not produced and reproduced insulated, isolated from the other forms of life. Human life depends on other forms of life, non-human life, to be able to produce and reproduce itself. So it was common sense that when you build technology under a holistic cosmology, you need to pay attention, be careful not to destroy the life surrounding you, because that will imply not only that you're going to destroy other life, you're going to destroy yourself. That idea was destroyed with the European colonial expansion and the globalization of Cartesian dualism, that is a secularization of Christendom dualism, okay? So why I'm going through this? I mentioned already that in the colonial expansion, they carry on structures of domination through colonialism and exploitation of people around the world. They carry on a system of dehumanization of the majority of the population of the world and hyperhumanization of the colonizers under a racist regime of superiority, inferiority along the line of the human. People above the line are superior beings, are humans. People below the line are non-human or subhumans. They have also pushed forward a system of domination of males over females, of men over women at a world scale through Christendom patriarchy. And they have put forward a system of destruction of the ecology of the planet, destruction of the life in planet Earth through the globalization of the cosmology of Cartesian dualism and the production of technology based on this dualism, as opposed to the holistic concepts that the people of the world had before European modern colonial expansion. So I'm going through this issue just to call attention to the problems that humanity faces today, the challenges we have today, and the injustices that are at stake. Now, what does justice mean today? Another twist of the modern world. I'm going over several problems that the modern world, through the European colonial expansion, imposed at a global scale. There are many. I don't have time to go over all of them, but I want to mention also another one, which is that the Europeans, especially after the French Revolution in their political philosophy, they emphasize in an absolutist way the concept of equality. Okay? First, we need to acknowledge that they were not the ones who invented the concept of equality. It was already in many civilizations, including in Islam. The Quran is a profoundly equalitarian text, okay, in terms of the equality of human beings, the equality of male and woman, the equality. So it's a profoundly egalitarian text where equality, the concept of equality is already there in the Quran. It's already there in Islamic tradition. But the West always practice epistemic extractivism. They will take knowledges from produced in the global South, in other parts of the world, and they will appropriate these knowledges, extract them in the colonial under colonial domination. They extract the knowledges and then they recycle them as it was they were the ones who discovered or invented this knowledge. So they make us believe that equality is a European concept. It's really not. I would say more. Equality, by absolutizing equality, what they're producing is a lot of inequalities because they're leaving on the side in the modern project the question of justice. So they are emphasizing on equality without taking into consideration the question of justice. So if you take, for example, two unequal groups in society, like today, okay, in the world we live, there are a lot of inequalities. And then you try to treat them equally in the eyes of the law, you're committing a lot of inequalities because in the name of equality, because they are already departing from different positions. One with a lot of resources, another good without resources. Now you treat them equal in the eyes of the law, you're just affirming their inequalities, because even if you use the law to say, okay, to treat them equally, in fact, they are already coming from an unequal treatment that is not going to be fixed if you don't change the society and the structure, the injustice structures of the society. So, so this concept of Iman Reza is justice for all or an injustice for anybody, for nobody, okay, injustice for nobody, is fundamental because that concept has to be materialized in real life. It cannot be just a slogan. And this is precisely the teachings of Iman Reza, calling attention to real life situations where the question of justice is implemented. So in order to treat people on their equal terms, you first have to have justice. So justice should be as a criteria, should be privilege over equality. That is, equality has to come in a secondary position because you could create a lot of inequalities by emphasizing equality without thinking in the question of justice. Look at the white feminists or the westernized feminists. They emphasize it on equality without thinking about the question of justice. And now what happened? A lot of the Western women not only have to take care of the home, but they also have to be working long hours a day to get a salary, a wage. So you emphasize on equality without thinking about the question of justice. And And in the name of equality, you created a big injustice because now women not only are in charge of the home and the kids, but they are now getting the wage, to sustain the house because they want equality with men. And then in the division of labor, they end up having more work to do than the male. So in the name, look at this, the traps of the Western feminists. In the name of equality, they end up creating a huge inequality, even worse than what they were trying of the problem they tried to solve. And in fact, that's why the question of justice has to be at the center. If you look at the Quran, in the Quran, the question of justice is the central question. It's not that the Quran doesn't have a concept of equality. It has a concept of equality. As I said, it's a profoundly egalitarian text. But always subordinating equality to justice, because in the name of equality, you can commit a lot of injustices. And this is the spirit of Iman Reza's point. Justice for everybody, injustice for nobody. In other words, if you have justice for a few people and injustice for the rest, there's no justice. It's just a mockery of justice, okay? When you look at the world we live today, in the name of equality, in the name of a false concept of equality, let's put it this way, a formal equality, to call it, it's a formalistic concept of equality that do not take into account justice, we're committing a lot of injustices. And look at where this civilization is taking us. It's taking us first to the ecological destruction of life in planet Earth. So justice has to also take into consideration the concept of doing justice to non-human living beings. That is, we cannot be destroying everything around us, the ecology of the planet, the living beings around us, okay? We cannot be destroying them and then say that we're being fair and creating justice when in fact we're destroying life in planet Earth, including ourselves as humanity, by the ecological disaster, okay? So if you look at the concept of justice also in Iman Reza and in Islam, is always also taking into consideration the treatment, the justice and fair treatment of non-living, non-human beings, okay? Living beings are non-humans, plants, animals. If you look at the tradition, there's always this treatment of all these living beings, not as objects, not as cosified, not as thingified, if you want to call it, turning them into objects that could be destroyed, that could be manipulated, that could be killed, but turning them into subjects and taking into consideration the fact that these are living beings that are subjects, that we need to also treat them with justice and fairness, okay? So this call for a holistic concept like Tawhid in our relationship with other forms of life is fundamental to come back to an equilibrium and avoid the destruction of life that the modern capitalist imperialist world has produced and keep producing at a world scale. So either we decolonize from this Cartesian dualistic concept and move into holistic concepts, social Tawhid, or we're going to have the days counted in planet Earth, because that looks as if it was some kind of cosmological discussion, have a lot of consequences for life and death in planet Earth today. And the concept, look at the world we live, we have the destruction of the ecology of the planet. Look at the world we live. We have the extermination, continuous extermination of human beings, okay, that are classified as animals, as non-humans, dehumanized, in process of domination, colonization, neocolonization. Look at the problem today of Zionism in Palestine. Look at this massacre, genocide that Palestinians are living today. This is a central problem of the injustices produced by the system we live today, is the question of racism, is the question of colonialism and neocolonialism, where a few countries in the world and a minority of the population of the world get the benefits of the destruction, super exploitation, domination of the people around the world. And if you have people submitted to super exploitation and living in horrible conditions, and you have the people where the West wants to take over their land in settler colonialism that is still ongoing in Palestine. So look at the long-term structure of settler colonialism, exploitation colonialism that goes back to the conquest of Al-Andalus all the way till today. And we need to, in a sense, move beyond this civilization of injustices. Injustices also against women. Women are being also super exploited, abused, raped in this system at a world scale. Okay, look at the killing of children. Look at the killing of children. In Palestine, we have a condensation of what is happening in the world at large. In Palestine, we see the mass killing in Gaza today, for example, of children, the mass killing of women, mass killing of human beings. And this is like a condensed or a concentrated, in Palestine, we see in a concentrated way what is happening at a world scale. In other places, the same things are happening in a different way. They are the impoverishment, the poverty, the super exploitation of people are being killed, as the bombs there are not coming from the air. They're coming from the economic super exploitation that becomes what is destroying the life of human beings, children, women, etc., in other parts of the world. So the equivalent of the drones and the bombing that people in Gaza are living in a condensed way is also living in other parts of the world, but without the drones, without the bombs, just the bomb of economic super exploitation. And we see that at a world scale. So this civilization have no concern for humanity. This civilization have no concern for life in planet Earth, human life and non-human life. This civilization have no sense of justice for a life in planet Earth, human life, non-human life. This civilization have no sense of justice for children, for women. This civilization have no concern of justice for the majority of the population of humanity today. So we need to move beyond this civilization. So this concept of justice, we need to put it at the center, and then equality comes in as a result of justice, not as the beginning point of the question of justice, because if we invert this, then we end up colonized with this concept of absolutizing equality and forgetting about justice, which is what happened in the modern world. Modernity brought this concept of absolutizing equality and forgetting the main and central question, which is the question of justice. We can have justice only after, we can have equality only after we have put a system of justice, okay? So we need a major transformation. It's a civilizational transformation. We need to move to the foundation of a new civilization. The civilization we have today means that there is a world where only one world is possible, the modern European, Eurocentric, Western-centric world, okay? And the rest are impossible because they destroy all the other civilizations. We are all within this civilization in a subordinated position. We need to move to a world where many worlds are possible, and this one becomes impossible. That is a world where many worlds are possible, where many worlds can flourish in peace, in human relations, of peace and solidarity, okay, with the values of solidarity, the values of fraternity, the values of peace, okay, and make this world of violence, destruction, impossible. We cannot achieve this world where every world is possible, okay, which will be a just and fair world, and follow Iman Reza. We cannot achieve that if there is still injustice for other people. We need to have justice for all, injustice for nobody, okay? And that slogan of Iman Reza should be the guiding principle through which we should look for a horizon of the foundation of new civilization where we can materialize, make real in planet Earth this question of justice for all, injustice for nobody. And with that, I finish my point, and thank you very much. I'm sorry, and I apologize that I have to condense many points that I know that require more explanation, but it will take me 2-3 more hours to explain them. So thank you for the invitation. Assalamu alaikum to all of you.